Thank you very much, everybody. And let's get started with today. Today, we are going to be hearing a presentation called Digital Innovation at the Library of Congress, checking in from LC Labs. Our presenter is Laurie Allen, who is the Chief of the Digital Innovation Division, also known as LC Labs, at the Library of Congress. The talk today will look at LC Labs, which is the Digital Innovation Division, in its 7th year now as a hub for research experiments and explorations to expand the horizons of the Library of Congress. We're very much looking forward to this as being part of our program. We'd like to welcome Laurie Anderson, and we look forward to your talk. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. It's really great to be virtually visiting Switzerland. I have a very dear friend who moved to Zurich right after college, and so I've been to Zurich a few times. Great affection for the place. And I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen and then start presentation. Oh, let me stop and do that again. Okay, not share the right thing. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. I'd go right into it. But before I do, I want to say that many of the slides that you'll see, and certainly a lot of the work that I'll be describing, represents work that I didn't do. It's in many cases, I joined the department at the Library of Congress a year ago. I joined the LC Labs, took over as the chief of the division of LC Labs, and so this is very much a case of if you see something that you probably someone else did it, and if you see something that you didn't like, probably I am misrepresenting it. So that's just a warning in advance. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Library of Congress and situating the LC Labs within the library, and then I'll focus on 3 areas that we're working on at the moment in LC Labs. I'm going to use the term LC Labs and Digital Innovation Division pretty much interchangeably. So the Digital Innovation Division is the sort of internal name of LC Labs. And 3 areas that we're currently working quite a bit on are machine learning and AI. We have an Innovators in Residence program, and then what I'm kind of labeling infrastructure for innovation that is really focused around workflows for data exploration. And I look forward to a conversation. So to get started with context setting, and as I'm talking, I'm really interested in hearing from all of you. So please do use the chat, and we'll have a great conversation when I run through the slides. But broadly speaking, the Library of Congress has as its mission to engage, inspire, and inform Congress and the American people with a universal and enduring source of knowledge and creativity. So that's quite a mission. Within the Library of Congress as an organization, I work in my department as part of the Office of the Chief Information Officer. So the library is a federal agency, and it's in the congressional branch of government, and OCIO, the Office of the Chief Information Officer, is the central IT organization within the library. The Library of Congress has a centralized IT organization. We build and sustain the technology for the Library Collections and Services, the Congressional Research Service, and the U.S. Copyright Office. It's always fun to give people a little data here. We steward over 174 total petabytes of data. It's a lot of storage. There's 210 systems, 2,700 servers. These are all likely a little bit out of date, but just to give you a sense of the scale of the technology infrastructure. Within the Office of the Chief Information Officer, the Digital Innovation Division, LC Labs, sits within the Digital Strategy Directorate. So that's a department within the IT organization that was formed in 2018 to shepherd the library's digital strategy, which was launched in 2018. The library launched a digital strategy, which was a 5-year plan that sat alongside the agency's strategic plan. So, there was this part of the library devoted to the digital strategy, and here were the goals of that. And this October, the library integrated the digital strategy into the strategic plan. So the digital strategy is still, exists, but instead of being a separate document, it's part of the library's broader strategic plan. Digital is, as we like to say, baked in. So the library strategic plan, which we are really, because the Digital Innovation Division is inside digital strategy, we think a lot about sort of strategic approaches to the library's technology and digital needs. So the goals of the Library of Congress strategic plan are, and these were just launched, these first two goals are the same as the earlier goals, but we've changed a little bit what the objectives are, and they're expand access and enhance service. And then we have two new goals for the 2014, I'm sorry, the 2024, living in the past, 2023 to 2028. So the next 5 years. These are two new goals that reflect the way that the digital strategy is really woven with it. And you can see that final goal is foster innovation. So our tiny digital innovation division certainly is not the only place for innovation around the agency, but takes on a little bit of a new role in an era in which digital fostering innovation is part of the goals of the library. But again, just to be really clear, it would be overwhelming if this was just our role alone. Digital innovation happens all over the library. The Library of Congress is the largest library in the world. It has a little over 3,000 staff. And I will say, having joined the library after years working in research libraries, it is understaffed relative to any research library I've ever worked in. It has a staff 10 times larger than the research library I worked in an Ivy League university, and our library staff was about 1/10 of this. But relative to, if you look at like collections per staff member, the library is tiny compared to, because our collection is just so huge. Or if you look at users served per staff member, our country is huge. Our service to Congress and the American people, and of course we have some responsibility to people around the world. It's really a kind of mammoth task. And so we think about scale. I just hadn't conceived of scale in the way that I've now grown to understand it at the Library of Congress. This is a very lean organization. It operates, it needs to find efficiencies wherever it can all the time. So innovation is happening everywhere. And the Library of Congress is more than than library collections. It is more than just a library. The Library of Congress reports to Congress, and so Congress, and includes the Congressional Research Service, which is basically the research arm of the US Congress. And we run congress.gov, which is one of our most widely used products it's the place that people come for legislative information, used daily by Congress members and their staff and members of the public. So that's a pretty big lift for the organization. And the Library of Congress is home to the United States Copyright Office, and the functions of the United States Copyright Office power, I heard this statistic, I haven't checked it, 3% of the US GDP. So the library's mission is quite big. Just this, I'll stop with the it's really big. But I did come from a research library, and I just couldn't imagine the scale. So there's, I said about 3,000 permanent staff members. We typically welcome about 1 million people in DC, and about 178 million on the website, and we have a huge number of items. I like the way the library has a specific way that it thinks about and describes our users, and I think it's really valuable, and it certainly influences the way that we work within the Digital Innovation Division within labs, which is, we think of our users as first Congress. We report to them. They are our bosses and our funders, and we are the Library of Congress. Creators, people who are making new knowledge, in part because of our role in copyright, but also just generally learners, and then connectors. And I think that connectors piece is really valuable to keep in mind. We don't have a formal relationship with public libraries around the country. It's a standalone institution. Does not have a mandate as a national library in the way that some other national libraries do. But of course, it functions in that role. So seeing our work in terms of how do we connect with connectors, people who are going to bring our collections and services out into the world. Okay, so now I'm going to, that was really just sort of scene setting. Where is the Library of Congress in the, what do we have? And then where does the library where does LC Labs fit? But just to give a little bit of context about LC Labs, it was founded before it moved into its current department. It's never been larger than 5 people. It's a very small, so if you've ever heard of anything done by LC Labs, it's just this really tiny group of people who are working really hard to bring huge impact, working always collaboratively with colleagues around the agency. But it's a small group. The labs was launched publicly in 2017, became part of the Office of the Chief Information Officer, joined the Digital Strategy Directorate in early 2019. And we now, as I mentioned, are beginning into the second phase with the new strategic plan that integrates digital throughout of thinking about what does the Digital Innovation Division mean in this new context. Our methods roughly can be broken down into these 3 areas. To be clear, while I hope to change this very soon, we have no developers. There's no software engineers on the labs team. We are we contract out for any development work that we do, and we have a pretty small budget for that. So we have done a lot of really impactful technical collaborations or contracts, but we don't have in-house expertise there. You know, the team is very technically savvy, but they are not technologists from a, you know, as developers. So we can basically break down our work into these methods. We've got experiments. These are relatively low risk ways of learning things, testing things, trying new approaches to see what works. The goal of these is learn something specific. We have residencies. The goal there is to bring someone with a unique vision and set of skills and learn from their efforts in whatever ways might benefit the agency or the library. And then good old-fashioned convenings, right? Maybe it's a working group or collaboration or a symposium, the idea that joining together with other people to address shared challenges can actually bring about quite a bit of innovation just in itself. So these are our methods. And then I want to talk about these 3 areas that we're currently kind of focused on. One is machine learning and AI, and that's, you know, probably not surprising. The team in LC Labs has been experimenting specifically on machine learning, but also many of our residencies, convenings, and experiments have used machine learning in some way or another, whether they were designed to put forward machine learning or for some other purpose. And this is a long list from the labs.loc.gov website, labs.loc.gov website about sort of what are our machine learning experiments to date. And I will tell you, there'll be a blog post. There's going to be a blog post sometime in the middle of next week where we kind of lay out what we learned from each of these about machine learning and AI from each of these experiments between 2019 and 2023. Earlier this year, and this is something that my colleagues Abby Potter and Megan Ferreter, Megan's no longer with the library, but had been working on for a while, a planning framework to think about how can we take the variety of sort of potential use cases of machine learning and AI, plus all the lessons we've learned from experimenting with AI, from collaborating and, you know, learning from colleagues who've been researching, to create a framework so that when someone says, can we use AI for this, we're able to really walk through what that might mean and potentially contribute to the broader library, archive, museum world who are having this set of conversations. And that this was something that they've been working on for a while. And we've, in the last year, really been using it in-house. So it was a set of conversations that, you know, the framework for planning was something that we were developing and thinking about as a kind of in collaboration with other large libraries, archives, and museums. And in the last year, we've really turned it internal. We've been actually trying to use it to make decisions internally about our experimental practices. And we call it the Labs AI framework. It's really just a way of planning. And it starts with this expectation that, you know, there are 3 elements basically to any machine learning: data, models, and people. This is not a presentation about the framework, so I'm going to kind of gloss over it, but we are presenting about this next week at the AI for Land conference, the Fantastic Futures conference in Vancouver. And we'll be publishing actually a GitHub repository of the tools that we are currently drafting and using it inside labs for planning AI. And so the expectation is that there are 3 elements of machine learning or AI that you need to think through when thinking about its implementation or its use. And those are data, models, and people. And there are three phases that we use and work with as we plan AI. And there's an understand phase in which we, and I'll get more into these in a minute. There's an understand phase, an experiment phase, and an implement phase. And they build on one another, and they are informed by policy and governance frameworks. And this slide, we keep messing with it because it's really busy, but I think it really encapsulates what we're actually doing on the ground, which is when we start, with a question, should we use AI for this? We start with a risk benefit analysis that takes into account, it's a worksheet. We're talking about a worksheet. It's a back, front and back of the page worksheet about risks and benefits, taking into account data, models, and people. We are working on principles and values, and we really try to make sure that those are explicit before we undertake this. This is really best practices everyone has been saying, but we're trying to implement it here. Being really explicit once we've sort of done the risk benefit and the principles and values, getting into how ready is this data for this work. And then the bottom there is local and domain expertise. The idea that if you are considering using automating a practice in your organization, understanding how is quality of that practice assessed right now. And if the way we assess quality is we hire experts, those experts need to be involved in making explicit and describing and then testing the quality output of any automated process. If there are experts involved, we have to kind of pull out that expertise. I'm not going to go through the full framework, but basically once you've done a bunch of work understanding the experiment, which is what we currently have 3 experiments running. I'll describe them in a second. And these are about building baselines, developing quality standards and benchmarks, and then really including staff at every point who have that expertise. And then we haven't actually gotten to the implement phase through the framework. We're still iterating on experiment. We've got 3 experiments, and we're on year 2 with one of them. So we may choose to implement at some point, and we just sort of outline what we know will be the pieces for implementation. The 3 experiments that we're working on currently, one is working with our catalogers on machine-generated cataloging records for ebooks. There's lots of places to read more about that, and we'll be continuing to publish on it. All 3 of these have are co-led by Abby Potter in labs, and by a subject matter expert in the head of a cataloging department who handles some ebooks in one case. In the second case, a person who works on the congress.gov workflows that we're trying to use machine learning on. That person is co-leading the experiment on generative data for congress.gov. And then in the case of historic copyright record books, this is one we know a lot of people would love for the copyright, the rights information to be machine readable for mid-20th century books or records. But we're working on that, and that is co-led by someone in copyright, so that we're making sure that these experiments, which are again not implementation, we are trying to learn how does machine learning work, what machine learning looks most promising, and then we iterate through experiments to make sure that we're accounting for costs. So this is that's the machine learning stream of work. The second stream, so that's mostly led by Abby Potter, though we all participate. The second stream of work is the Innovator in Residence program. This has been around for several years. It's led by Jamie Mears. And in this program, we hire artists, digital artists, data artists, educators, scholars, mostly artists, who are thinking differently about the ways that our collections might be used. They put in a proposal, we fund them. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's enough for them to really dig in. Our current innovator is Jeffrey U. Warren, and he is using library materials that maybe maps, maybe buildings, really searching through and then creating 3D visualizations with community members, descendants of places that no longer exist. So looking at for images from our collections from within the archive of places that aren't there anymore, and then building kind of 3D models in what he calls relational reconstruction, where the goal is to sort of connect with the people who might have lived in these places that aren't there anymore. And it's a really, I really love this project, and it's really helping us see things in a really amazing way. These are some of the earlier Innovator in Residence projects. I'm not going to show them all, but this is speculative annotation. So in this project, and I think I will just spend a moment showing this one in speculative annotation, which now hopefully you can see. You can see this is a work, and I could, for example, add, it's a teaching tool. She made it for and with teachers to be used in school. And you can annotate works, and she made these, stamps that really are quite specific about how would you want to annotate a work so that people can use it, and it's reusable. The code is on GitHub. And then she worked with staff members to annotate some pieces. So this, again, it's for use with students who are, how do you look at this and how do you read this? And here's one of our experts saying, she's tagged up all the places that you can, understand what's happening in this. So it's an annotation tool for our materials. This was one of the Innovator in Residence projects. I love it. Another one is the Newspaper Navigator demo. I'm not going to show this one. It's one of my favorites. It's amazing. And this was very much machine learning, informed by machine learning, and drew on machine learning. It was, he pulled the visual images out of the Chronicle of America, out of millions and millions of pages of newspapers. He pulled photos, maps, cartoons, and was able to separate them based on what had been a crowdsourcing experiment that labs had done a few years before, where people were tagging which kinds of visual material they were. He used that as training data and then made this spectacular set of data sets that are actually, here's all of, for example, the photographs in this giant set of newspapers, and his code has been reused. It's a really great project. And it's also very helpful because he made an interface that allows you to train a model, and I can show it if people want, but I'm going to skip it for now. I will show Citizen DJ. This is a second. I'm gonna have to pull up another. Here we go. So this is Citizen DJ. This was made by Brian Fu. There we go. Sorry, this was made by Brian Fu as when he was an Innovator in Residence, and I'm going to just show you. This is where he went through the library's sound collections and identified, with a lot of work and a lot of help, thousands of public domain recordings that are in these. And then he using machine learning, but all sorts of other things, he made these visual representations of the sounds in our collections. So little snippets of sound. And so this is processing the National Screening Room collection. And I will just do, so the colors indicate the sounds. If I scroll, it's gonna be really loud. This is, and then if I want to say, well, what's the, this is Henry Brown. I can play it. And I can also remix it if I'm like, oh, I want to make hip hop with that. Really, really fun. If you're like, I don't want this to sound like 70s R&B. It's really fun. It's and it actually has been used in a lot of like after school programs where folks gather kids together to learn hip hop. It's really, gather kids together not to learn hip hop, but for like an after school activity. But it's so fun, and it's the idea is it's inspired by crate digging, which is was very popular in hip hop musicians in the early days of hip hop, but has become more difficult because of copyright restrictions. And so what he did was sort of say, what can we do within copyright restrictions that allows you to kind of get back to that, or reusing early sound. And I love this for all kinds of reasons, but one is because of the specificity of the audience that he had in mind. He is a hip hop artist and he made it for that audience, and it has been used by millions of people. It turns out it's not only cool for hip hop producers, but the interface is designed for them and it works for them. And it's just, I love this. The third area, and I'll be finished talking in a moment. The third area that we're working on is what I'm sort of roughly calling infrastructure for innovation. And this is a newer one, and it's not, they've been working on these things, but I'm trying to kind of name them. And the earliest is that the the LC Labs was, the first place to put the API, the library's API, to sort of get the library to release its API publicly for reuse. And they've been consistently doing work, making tutorials, hosting tutorials for how people can use the loc.gov, the loc.gov API to pull our materials out and remix them, reuse them, make them available in new ways. So this documenting the library's API has just been ongoing. They've been making tutorials, and I think of this as sort of creating infrastructure for innovation, making it more easy for more people to actually use these materials. Another piece of what I'm now calling this infrastructure for innovation or data exploration is that the library has been providing some ad hoc bulk data sets through a page that used to be called LC for Robots. We recently renamed it because robots now feel a little bit scary. So this was the old name. The new name is Data for Exploration, and I urge you to check it out. And so this is where we've been sort of hosting bulk data when we can. The Web Archives data set is really spectacular if you haven't checked those out. And then importantly, we got in 2019 a grant from the Mellon Foundation called Computing Cultural Heritage in the Cloud. So this is, again, back to that sort of infrastructure for innovation. How can we find models to support cloud-based research computing? So sort of, and understand the costs, because I think none of us do, and the possibilities. What we learn over and over in this is that people want human readable data. Our data, the idea that you can, for example, we could just, put into a bucket all of the public domain materials and just let people go through them. Almost no one wants that. It's too hard. It's too difficult to look through our materials. It's the barrier to entry is so incredibly high that unless you work at the Library of Congress, it's too hard. Our metadata is too confusing. We don't even know computate in a machine readable way. We can't do item level rights information. So it's the whole thing, it turns out, needs a huge amount of intervention. So through a lot of iteration, we're iterating towards what we think of as sort of potentially replicable iterative data packages. So how can we repackage our data so that it's available in bulk, but has a lot of what we now know people really want, which is a more substantive overview of the data and the collection from which it is derived, things like what's missing, why is this only a partial thing, because that's the way that library collections work. They're not like other data sets where it's like, yeah, now that you have the data, you understand this domain. It's always partial. So we're trying to create a kind of replicable data package, and we're still really iterating on this, but we have a new place that we're putting these, which is called data.labs.loc.gov, which is our sort of, with an eye towards making somewhat standardized data packages for reuse and exploration available outside of the library's, places where the data may change, where it's not a permanent part of our collection, but is actually an exploratory space. And so we contracted as part of the grant to kind of help us understand what might be some workflows for packaging data. We have data.labs.loc.gov and public permissions on an S3 bucket in Amazon, so that we're making available data and seeing what works. And that's sort of the overview. I mean, I could talk in so much more detail about any of these, but I wanted to make sure that we have plenty of time for conversation. And I guess my big takeaway as I thought about what I think has been valuable lessons that I've learned from working within labs, and also that we see really going forward, is keeping people at the center of innovation. So that's really true. This is about data in particular. People, every time we work with people who are trying to use our data, we learn again and again, they want context. They want human readable information. The more they can get, the better. We also, and I think that, part of, I didn't go into detail about the risks presented by AI. I really am publishing a blog post about it next week. Happy to talk more about it. But the point is, data enrichment is super important and valuable, but the quality is not quite there for meeting our values. And some of the ways that the quality isn't there is that the outputs are misleading and discriminatory and biased in terrible ways, and also just broken and not good. So aligning AI potential to our actual needs is tremendously challenging. But again, it's about what do people actually want, and then just working with people. And I think I have one more slide on this, which is one of the things I've loved about working with labs is that it's partially all of our engagements, experiments, residencies, whatever, we try to do sort of good user testing, user research as part of it. Whenever we have experiments where the outcomes might impact someone's work, we try to partner with them in conceiving of and working on the experiment. We're really trying to notice the barriers to innovation that we all feel and address them. So all of those things are kind of internal, but I think another really important and exciting thing that we will continue to do is working with artists, independent scholars, and people who sort of are going to see things differently. Not to ask, how would you like to do X, but instead, basically, what do you need so that our materials are part of the work that you do, are part of what you want, and that funding innovators and residents, the idea that it's too hard for data artists to use our materials unless we offer them some funding. But if we do that and we see what they build, like the Citizen DJ example, it actually gives us a huge amount of information to learn what kinds of innovations might be valuable. So that understanding that, making other people's vision a reality is one of the really key things. It's not just about what technologies are we using to innovate, though it really is. We spend a lot of energy on that. But it's also about whose innovations are we supporting, and how can we learn from every innovation we try to support. And I think that it has made the work more well-rounded and stronger. And I think I'm going to stop there. But happy to discuss more.
Thank you very, very much, Laurie. That's incredible. There's a lot of really, really interesting things there, not only to play around with, but a lot of points to start from for a lot of us. Libraries big, libraries small, and I think a lot of things resonate. It's now the question and answer time. So you have several modes to communicate your questions and answers depending on your comfort level. As I indicated, you can throw your questions into the chat. You have the option of raising your hand, or you can send your question to either Salome or to myself, and we can read out the questions on your behalf. So if anybody would like to get the ball rolling, the chat is open. Please feel free.
Thank you.
We have one question so far. Could you provide more details about the project for generative data from Congress.gov using machine learning?
Yes. The generative there, I wish I had taken that out, to be honest. I mean, it is. Yes, I can. So we have an experimental basically contracting vehicle. So we're doing this, we're work with a contractor, is important to say. So we've contracted with a vendor, and it is for Congress.gov when bills are submitted by members of Congress for the they submit bills in the House and Senate. Copies of those go through a series of functions and then come over to the Congress.gov team. And staff assign subject headings, in some cases. So identifying geographic names, identifying organizational names. And those we thought were promising areas for maybe machine learning. Maybe there are some models that could help identifying geographic names, identifying organizational names. So, and the question, I mean, this is really, it's an experiment that's happening very much outside of the production workflow for that, because as you can imagine, the strict quality standards inside that production workflow are very, very high. So this is an experiment. It's a much more low cost way of trying this. So we've contracted with a vendor there, and we've actually added to that, we're also trying bill summaries. So one of the other things that staff do are they summarize the bills in nonpartisan, unbiased ways. And that's expert work done by specialists. But we're curious. I think there's a lot of curiosity about how well can AI and machine learning aid those staff in their work of assigning these subject terms. So that's the subject terms, right? The named entity recognition for geographic names, organizational names, and that's a pretty mature technology. And so the question is sort of how difficult is that? And the idea is we use this experiment, see how can we develop sort of first drafts. Like can we tweak enough? What do we need to offer the models as training data? All those kinds of questions. How much training data do we need? How good can they get? Which models work best? And then as we begin to build benchmarks and quality standards, for maybe saying it's not this set of this model in this structure with this the tooling around the model is also one of the things. There's just so many variables. So by doing an experiment, we're really trying, the goal is like isolating those variables. Okay, it turns out it matters, these things matter. And then once we expect, I think, to iterate a few more experiments. So experiment, how good can it be? I don't know how good the bill summary part is going to be, but we're going to find out. And then experiment, and then we have a kind of model of, okay, experiment 1 is just like which parts of this are promising. Experiment 2 is more closely in the workflow, right, where getting better at getting the best machine learning output we can, but also addressing the right part of the workflow. And then we start experimenting where we look at things like cost benefit analysis, because until we know what it can do, it's hard to know how to do a risk analysis on like the costs, because the costs are too unknown until you know actually what you're talking about. And then beginning to build things like monitoring plans and that sort of thing. So that's the kind of basics of I hope that answers that one.
I myself have a question. At one point you mentioned the importance of identifying what people actually want. So especially coming from, as a number of us come from smaller institutions with smaller staff, do you have either advice or recommendations on how you do that? Because particularly with a small team and so much effort, what approaches have you found work the best for your particular scenario?
I have so many thoughts about this. I mean, before I came to the Library of Congress, I was the director of digital scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. And so the kind of trying to help libraries do things that they would otherwise not do has been kind of my niche for a little while. And I think, in all honesty, and I'll answer more from that perspective. Oh my gosh, I didn't say this. I should have said this. I am not representing my words do not reflect the Library of Congress. I'm only representing myself. Oh goodness, sorry, I didn't say that. It's true. But in this case, it's extra true, because I think it's a balance. I think using one's professional judgment about there's always a balance between being fair so that every person gets the same level of service, and noticing an opportunity to say, we're going to go all in on this project, try to learn as much as we can from it. And that means the person whose idea this is gets way better service than other people. And I think that to me, I would say speaking very personally, libraries end up erring on the side of fairness. I'm very much for fairness. I think it's important, but I think we have to see opportunities where we say, this person's question, if we are fair, we aren't going to help them very much. But if we notice that we can learn a lot by actually trying to get them exactly what they want, and we're going to spend a sort of bizarre amount of our effort on helping this person who has a question or an idea get exactly what they want, and we're going to really document what we're learning, we're going to talk about it, we're going to basically make a deal with them where we say, we're going to really help you, but we also are going to try to learn from you. We're going to need you to help us with that. And setting the expectation, like, and when we're done helping you, we're not going to keep helping you. We're going to throw your project away in 3 years. Like, if you're not ready to sign up for, this is a very short-term thing, you're going to get the same service as everyone else, which is basically, we're not going to help you very much. So I think I'm a big fan of like nice boundaries, but diving in on the occasional really hard one, as long as you are clear with them that that's what's happening. And I think you learn a lot. And I think that Labs has done that with the innovators in residence. And I know that I found that really valuable. And I would say also, like, choosing your partners on those kinds of things really wisely, like making it a thing that you actually want to work on, with a person you actually want to work with, will make that a lot better. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's something I think about a lot.
It does. It gives a lot of point of departure, because one's trying to figure out how to balance different needs, and particularly with innovations like this, it can be very challenging.
Yes, and it is, and it's a thing that is sort of, you have to accept. Some people are going to be like, that's not fair. It's like, if this is the part of the world where fairness is most important to you, you're looking at the world and you're like, that part isn't fair. Like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of unfairness in the world. I don't think I'm the worst, but I do try to be. I'm sorry, Salome. Yeah.
Yes, could you please give us a bit more detail on how you choose the project, experiments, redundancy?
Yes.
Thanks.
So yes, so that is that balance. So in all honesty, it's a small division in a large institution. And so sometimes the projects are chosen for us from above. Someone higher up that wants us to try something. And that is, in all honesty, some of how things are decided. We have a rubric for how we will, and we're actually doing it this week, for example. Everyone on the team has been building a little profile, a little like one pager on each idea that's come up for a major project for us. And they've got a little one pager, and then we have a little rubric that's like, how much impact will this have? How much will we learn? Does it help us diversify our skill set or our partners, or does it help us go deeper, further in an area we know we need to do that in? There's a set of rubrics and we apply them. And it, so that's part of it, is we really do. I think it's also true, though, again, this sort of balance, that is, we have a rubric and we have a one-sheeter that I require that everybody kind of fill out, like, but understanding an idea well enough to evaluate it when it's a new idea is very hard. And it takes a lot of work. So if we could have all the info, it's actually frustrating. If we could have all the info we would want to have before making a decision, before we made the decision, all my staff would do is go out and gain that information. And they couldn't do any experiments. They couldn't host anything. They couldn't do any innovation if they were thoroughly creating kind of, proposals that have all the information we need with every cost benefit and cost estimation and all of that. So we think of it more as, we sort of get a bunch ready, and then we make decisions. And there are always some that are a little bit sketchier. I really like I'm comfortable with the idea that as we have time and inclination, we will continue to make some better. So some might be absolute winners for 2 years from now, but the idea just isn't there yet. And if the staff member in the course of their work can fill it out more, great. but otherwise we're not going to be able to do that one. So we have a rubric. Sometimes we get things from above, but it's a little bit of a fluid thing. I really, when I came into this role a year ago, I was like, we're going to have a new system. It's going to be very systematic. But we sometimes, you know, if someone high up says you have to do this, you do it. And they're not wrong, you know, so it's a balance. I love structure, I love systems, I use them, but I mean, I love them. The staff will tell you I'm obsessed. I want the one sheeter, but then it's like, and then the answer is like, maybe, let's see. I don't know if one sheeter translates very well.
No, but I think all of us have, no matter the size of the library or whether it's a special library or a intergovernmental organization, we're all familiar with how do we reduce this down enough to communicate
right.
without losing the reality of what we're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
As the session is winding down, I want to make sure that everybody has had the chance either raise your hand and you can ask your question directly, or send a question to us through the chat. Take advantage of the opportunity to ask any further questions you might have. I see a hand.
Yeah, it's me again,
Ah!
Catherine. One question about then, do you know how many of these initiatives that you created then, I mean, really get into the real life of the library, I mean, and then develops?
So the AI certainly is the machine learning framework, and that you know, doesn't mean that we're implementing AI, but the framework is absolutely in practice. It's a hard question, I think. So one of the things that I'm a little bit interested in is starting to retire some of those experiments, not because they aren't still wonderful and valuable, but because I think if we want to make a case for short-term experimentation, we have to take things offline, or we're just making everything harder. So well, that's not true. The labs team, before I got there, they started the library's By the People program, which is our crowdsourcing transcription program. And that was started in labs. And it is now a standalone program that exists in another part of the library. It exists, their software, you know, it is really the team. And I think it's a lovely model, and I would like to repeat it. The team, you know, was a brand new, to have a crowdsourcing program at the library was brand new. And so they incubated the team. They hired people in labs because this is the part of the library where people are the most familiar with like a brand new thing that's never been done. So though, you know, there's expertise all kinds of places, but this is the like out of left field work comes in. And so they incubated the team. And then after 3 years, they moved the team. So some of them are now, you know, what the person who was a developer now works with the developers. And then other folks work in the departments where it made the most sense, where they were already kind of connected. So I love that model, that like you're trying to let the agency's trying a really brand new thing. You start the team with them, with the folks who are the new thing starters, and then they move. So that's a great example. Things like Citizen DJ and Newspaper Navigator, the lessons have been, we've learned a lot that we've incorporated, but the actual, we don't have that, the kind of, they're not long-term products that we use, which is okay.
All right, I'm waiting to see if there's any other hand coming up, because this will probably be our last question. If anyone has a question, I'll go ahead and do my wind down to get everybody a chance to type very, very quickly. But in advance, thank you very much, Laurie. This is very interesting and I look forward to watching it again to catch what I missed. This session has been recorded and will be available, so we will make it available from the ALIS website and from the ALIS YouTube channel. We invite you to share the link within your networks for those who may not have been able to attend but are interested. This is the last of the Library Science Talks for 2023. We are preparing the program for 2024 and are actively looking for recommendations. Laurie, please feel free to send us any ideas you have on your side too, because we're looking to try to set up a very interesting program for next year as well. So I am not seeing any questions or any hands. So I'm going to go ahead and close the session. Our thanks to, again, Laurie, as well as to CERN and Zentrale Bibliothèque Zurich, who are our partners for the Library Science Talk session. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Take care.
Thank you.